Why basketball beginners should not start with expensive basketballs. I'm Tony. Welcome back to Streetball Strategies.
Bizzle said unleash the Kraken, so on beats I'm spazzing. Triple DB snapping, spitting fire like Khaleesi's dragon. I assault and beat a track, and when my team be rapping, we MC with passion, they just lies and they team be capping.
Today we're talking about beginner basketball players and in general what kind of basketballs are best for them. More specifically, why beginners should not be using expensive basketballs. It can be very counterproductive to building someone's game by giving a beginner a more complex basketball than they need or are ready for. If you get a beginner player, a prospective potential player, just a regular, normal, basic basketball, if they take to the game while using that very basic basketball, then now you know for sure that it's much more likely that they are going to progress and stick with the game because they actually love the entirety of the game. They've experienced what it's like to bounce and shoot and run after a pass, catch a basketball, even though it's a simple, basic basketball, and yet they love it still. If they only are engaged in the game because they have a fancy, expensive, impressive basketball so that they can show off to, the other people around them, then maybe they're involved in the game for the wrong reasons. And if that's the case, it's very unlikely that's going to be sustainable over years to come. So maybe you get an expensive, complicated, fancy basketball now, but sooner than later, the chances are you're gonna get tired of it because you're only buying that basketball because it's fancy, it's impressive to other people, but you're not actually interested in building your game, thus sustaining your presence out here on the court. Thus you'll pay a lot of money for that expensive basketball one time, use it for a year, and then lose interest and never use it again. So today let's talk about the two main reasons I have for why beginner players should start off using basic basketballs, not expensive ones. Reason number one you should start with the basic basketball is because my 30 years of outdoor park basketball experience tells me that there is an actual process, an actual hierarchy to learning the game in the most efficient and effective ways possible. One of those universals is that every player starts as a blank sheet. Now, some players may have more innate, born with natural basketball talent than other players, but in terms of skills, in terms of experience, we all start as a blank sheet. We all start from the same place. So if we all start our basketball journeys in the same place and start going down the same general path, my mentality is that you as a blank slate as a player should also start with a blank slate as a ball. What I mean is more expensive, more complicated, complex, more higher quality basketballs have features to them that make playing basketball easier. You as a beginner don't want those yet. You don't want the game to be easy. You want the game to really be as hard as it can be because you want to build your foundation, your skills, your abilities, your fundamentals on the hardest aspects of the game that you can. You want to overcome them, face them, figure out what it is you need to do, overcome them, master them using the most basic basketball you can. At the beginning, you want the game to be as hard as it can be so that later on, years into your career, the game is so much easier for you than your contemporaries who are at the same experience level as you, but for you the game is so much easier because at the beginning you made it harder and then you overcame that. Whereas the average player probably wants to start with the most expensive, impressive basketball they can, that has features that make the game easier at the very beginning of their career. Players that start with that kind of basketball, they don't have to go through the trials and tribulations that you do But by doing so, they cheat themselves out of experience, out of skills, out of abilities, using basic basketballs that you won't cheat yourself out of, because you will get a basic basketball, and thus you will have experience, skills, abilities with basic basketballs that they won't. More advanced basketballs have features like more complicated pebbling on the cover of the basketball, giving you a better overall grip, or they have wider, deeper grip channels so you can get your fingertips deeper into the ball, meaning you have more control over how the ball leaves your hand and your fingertips. They can also have like a cover on them that has like moisture wicking technology, so if you sweat on the ball, if it gets wet from a puddle or something like that, it can dry faster. Some balls will have more quality material on the ball, covering the ball, making it feel more cushiony, making it feel more comfortable, and also probably prolonging its endurance so that the ball lasts you and it holds up for longer. But you as a beginner, you don't need any of those features. Not only do you not need any of those features, but you don't even really understand how to use them properly or to the extent in which they will truly benefit you yet. Those features are meant to make a basketball more usable, more user-friendly. But as a beginner, you need to understand what it's like to have a basketball that has very average at best pebbling, so it doesn't have the best grip. You need to understand what it's like to not really have grip channels. You don't need that super fine precision control yet when you're a beginner playing basketball. You want to be able to master that kind of ball, because if you can master the basic kind of basketball, balls that have average pebbling, average grip channels, if you can master that ball, you can master any basketball moving forward. Because you have to keep in mind, over your career, if you're playing 10 plus years, you're going to have dozens of different basketballs throughout your career. As you change balls, as you replace those basketballs, you're gonna have to get used each time to what it's like for using that new basketball. How does it feel? How's the grip? How's the texture? How's the bounce? Every time you change basketballs, you have to get used to that. Not only that, but when you do start to get advanced into basketballs that have better quality and better features, those balls take a week or two to break in on concrete and asphalt. So the way they feel when you first take them out of the box, they're not going to feel like that the entirety of their lifespan. They'll feel like that for the first week or two until you get the initial wear and tear on them. After that, that's how they're going to feel for the rest of their lifespan. But getting used to that can take that week or two for you to adjust. But if you start using basic basketballs as a beginner, when you have to go through that break-in process, that getting used to and getting comfortable with the new basketball process, if you start with a very basic basketball, you are going to exponentially speed up the process of doing that over time. So it'll take you less time to get used to a new basketball each time you replace your basketball. So those 2 points in themselves, one, building your skills and your abilities with the most basic basketball you can find, and then replacing that basketball over time with other basic basketballs, and then building your ability to get used to the break-in process of those new basketballs and more advanced basketballs moving forward. That's the first reason why you should start out using basic, not expensive basketballs to begin with. The second reason you should not start out with playing and using expensive basketballs as a beginner is because, let's say for instance, you do start out using expensive basketballs. So the first basketball you get is a really expensive, impressive, official, like NBA looking basketball. Number one, there is no place to go from there but down in terms of quality of basketball. If you get the highest quality basketball to start with, now there's nowhere to progress from there. But more importantly to me, the bigger point is that, sure, you have a really good, expensive, fancy, impressive basketball. For those of you who don't know, and I can't speak to the indoor organized basketball culture because I've been an outdoor player my whole life, but out here at the park and numerous parks that you go to, it is super imperative that you play with strangers. You get on the court, you play with, you play against strangers. It's all good to play with your family and friends, and have a good time doing so. But in terms of building your game, learning, training yourself, it is imperative that you play with and against strangers as often as you can. The reason for that being is they don't know you. Because they don't know you, they don't care about you. They don't care about hurting your feelings. You are an obstacle to them. They are trying to use you to improve their game just like you are doing to them. And the thing about strangers and people that you don't know, especially if it's you by yourself showing up to a random court and people are already out there and they seemingly already know each other and you alone are the stranger, those players are not going to want to use your basketball. Pretty much most players, especially the serious players, are going to want to use their basketball. They're not going to want to use your basketball, the one expensive, fancy, impressive basketball that you have, the one and only basketball that you are used to using. They are not going to want to use that ball. They're going to say that if you play with them, you use their basketball or you just don't play with them. And if you don't play with them, now you're not getting the experience that you need to build your game. Now, you may come across situations now and then when you show up to the park and you do have the best basketball, especially if you watch this channel and watch my playlist on this channel, you will understand what you need in terms of what makes a good quality basketball. When you show up to the park and you do have the best basketball, the more casual the players are, the more likely they are to recognize that you do have the best basketball out there, and they may actually choose to use your basketball. The more serious they are, the more competitive they are, the more likely they are to only want to use their basketball because they're used to their basketball. They know that you are not used to their basketball. Thus, they are counting on the likeliness that using their basketball is going to give them a distinct advantage over you. And the more strangers you play with on the more random courts that you go to, the less likely it is that you're going to actually be able to use that fancy, expensive, impressive basketball that you have, the one and only basketball that you're used to. Now you're putting yourself at a distinct disadvantage because you're used to the pebbling that your ball has. You're used to the grip channels. You're used to how it bounces. You're used to its grip and its texture. You're used to how it works for you specifically. But once you're not allowed to use it anymore, and you have to now use this other basketball, which is probably going to be less quality, less valuable than your basketball, and you're only used to using the highest quality, most expensive basketball, now you're playing with on a scale of on 1 to 10, you're playing with a 6, and you're used to your basketball, which is like an 8 or 9. Can you adjust to that on the fly in the midst of competition and do it, without exposing that weakness of your game to the players around you? Very unlikely that you're going to be able to do that in a way where the more serious they are, if they see that you're uncomfortable with a ball, you're not really going to be able to hide that very well. The more they see that, the more aware of that they are, the more they're going to use it against you. But by starting your basketball career, your journey with the most basic basketball, now you're ensuring that if you start out using a 1 or a 2 on a scale of a 10, you master using that basketball. And you replace that basketball with another brand, another kind of basketball that's another 1 or another 2, and you master that again. The more you go through that process, the more likely it is that when you show up to those courts and you're playing with those strangers, no matter what basketball they have, you're going to be able to adjust and get comfortable to that new basketball pretty much automatically. Now it's going to take you some repetitions of that happening, of that situation, for it to really feel comfortable and more innate, but it's going to happen for you quicker and more comfortably than another average player who started their career with a fancy, expensive basketball because they're only used to those special features that expensive basketball has, whereas you started out with a basic ball. Because of that, now no matter what basketball you come across, you'll be able to use that basketball freely and comfortably compared to any other competition that you may come across. That is why beginner basketball players should not start out with expensive basketballs. While I do encourage that when you first start playing, your first priority should be that the game is fun, once you have established that you do enjoy the game and you want to start building your skills and your abilities, it is important, it's very imperative that you start with the most basic basketball that you can find. By doing so, you are going to build the best foundation, the best fundamentals for skills and abilities going forward. You don't want to start out your career by taking what could be considered shortcuts by having a basketball that is intended to make the game easier. You want the game to be as little user-friendly as possible when you first start building your foundation for your skills, because thus you're forced into the fact that everything you do is going to be pretty much as hard as it can possibly be. From that difficulty, though, will come a stronger, better foundation than the players around you who may not have the kind of basic basketballs you have, because they want to have more expensive, more impressive basketballs than everybody else. But because you're building a better foundation for your game than they are, not only is it more likely that you are going to stick around longer than they will, but it's very probable that you will have a better game, a better longevity, a better understanding of the game than they will, because you chose to make things harder on yourself at the beginning than they did. So I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, if you found it helpful at all, if you think it's going to help you decide to start your career off on the right path by using a more basic basketball, then please subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure you hit that thanks button down below. When you hit that button down below, not only will any comment you make on this video be highlighted and thus stand out from all the other comments, but it directly supports the channel when you hit that button. So for anyone that does hit that thanks button, know I greatly appreciate it. As always, like, share, comment. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever any video goes live on this channel. And until then, I'll see you guys next week.
It's a crowd when we pull up, me, we walking with the muscle in the car. When we pull up, even when they try to shuffle, I'm